Welcome back to Reform This on the Blaze Podcast Network. This is Zuhdi Jasser, and I'm honored to be joined by Asra Nomani, unbelievably fearless former reporter of the Wall Street Journal, who just released a book that every one of you should get, put on your mantle and share with your friends. It's called The Woke Army, and it's a new book about the Islamists joining the left-wing activists in this woke army, the Red-Green Alliance that's destroying America's freedom, by Asra Nomani. So we last left off talking about the identity politic movement, critical race theory, all of the sort of in-the-mud politics that you've been on the front lines of. Now I want to sort of shift to talking about many of us in the reform movement, including not only yourself and myself, Raheel Raza, and so many others, have been very active in sort of trying to get a voice of diversity. And we for longs have been screaming from the top of our lungs, telling not only conservatives but moderates and the left all over the U.S. and all over Europe, listen, if you really believe in diversity, then you should lift up ideological diversity, not ethnic diversity, not simply skin deep diversity, but ideological diversity. And yet it seems that now you have conservatives, especially, talking about the fact that schools are losing diversity. And the books that you just showed us in the last segment talk about ramming down a extremist Marxist ideology. And we saw through COVID and elsewhere the suppression of every other idea so that there was no diversity of thought. So let's talk about the protagonists, those of us who've been on the front lines of Muslim reform, and what we can bring to the table to the rest of America in all of these battles against identity politics, critical race theory, etc.
Yeah, I think we have such a contribution to make, and we are making it. I'll give you an example of how our opportunity emerges. So over these last 3 years almost, I've been waging this war as a mama bear with so many other parents, so many brave parents, and we have fought one really important idea, that we have to keep politics out of school and we have to keep merit and fundamentals of education as our top priorities. So one of my colleagues in this has been a mom by the name of Suparna Datta. So Suparna is Hindu. She's an immigrant also from India. She is an accidental activist just like me on this education war front. Well, Suparna was ignored, just like all the rest of us parents, by our school board, including Abrar Omesh, who we talked about earlier. And so she said, okay, I'm going to change things. And who is it that we were facing? We were facing a man by the name of Atif Karni. He was the education secretary for the governor, Ralph Northam. And when I looked at his political contributions, Zuhdi, oh my gosh, where did they go? They went back to 500 Grove Street and that whole network of investment houses and funds and all these alphabet soup of organizations and people that have propped up the entry of the Islamist interests into the Democratic Party. So Atif Karni put a hit on my son's high school, Thomas Jefferson High School for Science and Technology, a high school 70% Asian, majority minority. Who were a lot of those minority students? Hindu students from India, because their parents had come here for technology jobs. Well, Atif Karni used his power to change admissions to the school, get rid of our merit-based test, and he worked hand in glove with another man, a politician named Babar Latif, who also was funded by this Islamist network. I'm going into the weeds on this because I want these battles to come to life for people, because here it was, these people, Zuhdi, that you and I have battled on the religious front, at the mosque establishments, and now they were coming into my son's school. And what was the first thing that Atif Karni did in order to silence me? He called me an extremist. Yeah.
And the Muslim reform movement, a hate group.
A hate group, exactly. wow, I was just like, are you kidding me? But it really disturbed me because this was now government. This was now the state, Zuhdi. It wasn't just these, alphabet soup of Muslim brothers. It was the state.
Secretary of Education.
Yeah. And so why did it matter that I existed? Because I challenged him as a Muslim reformer also, and that's how our Muslim reform movement matters and our leaders matter. Because fast forward, introduced you to the story of Suparna Dutta. She helps to elect the governor, Glenn Youngkin. She's fed up, so she helps to elect him. He names her to the Virginia Board of Education. We, the parents, finally feel like we have a voice. And who does she go toe-to-toe up against, Zuhdi? The former governor, Tim Kaine's wife, Ann Holton. It's a debate about the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. Suparna argues that this text should remain in this curriculum. Remember, Abrar Ramesh wanted to go after the curriculum, right? The text should remain that these are remarkable documents. Ann Holton argues feverishly they are not remarkable documents. And then when the topic goes to socialism, she says, I don't see a problem with it in the United States. Suparna stood strong against this for the America, democracy, our system, our founding documents. A hit went out on Suparna that Sunday night, just a few days later. Her name was supposed to go up for nomination now to the Virginia Senate. And who is it that ends up calling Suparna a white supremacist? First, a network called Red for Ed. So they're not being subtle. The Red, meaning their alliance with the far left and the socialists. For Ed, they want to enter into our educational system. 2 days later, the nomination of Suparna Dutta is before the Senate. And who is it that calls the swing voters among the Democrats but a man by the name of Rafi Ahmed, part of this network from 500 Grove Street. Another man, all from these mosques around this area that are part of this establishment that you and I have been challenging. So Zuhdi, what was I able to do? At least speak up to it. Those Muslim leaders defamed Suparna as an anti-Muslim Hindu extremist, just like they've tried to defame us. But as a Muslim reformer, as a Muslim, I was able to write about it, expose it, speak up for Suparna, who stood strong even after, yes, a unanimous defeat of her nomination by the Dems. Introduced by who? A Muslim from India named Ghazala Hashmi. So we, as Muslim reformers, Zuhdi, we are so critical in standing up to these folks as they try to hijack America's political system to lean towards the Islamist agenda and this far left agenda. We're so critical.
And I think if you look now, there's a lot of movement both in the center and in the right about the fact that the front line of politics across the country, as the Federalists and others have been writing, is at the school board level, is at the local community levels, and that's where the future of America will be fought. And I think, the lesson that I'm hearing you talk about is that if America is going to move back to our roots, which is meritocracy, and not simply based on class basis or based on racial preference, etc. So if you truly care about a civil rights movement of the 60s and 70s that was so important to bring us back to our principles, then you look what happened at TJ, and you see that here an Asian majority school, which is a minority, was targeted because of class warfare. And yet the Dearborns of the world, where the Islamists are a majority, aren't subject to that same type of criticism. It's just absurd. Everything's upside down, where the Dearborns of the world are pushing Sharia into their cities, and where you have minorities that might happen to be a majority that are truly achieving because of meritocracy, they're being suppressed. And I think as we expose this, Muslim reformers can be sort of on the front lines, if you will, because they can't tell us, in 3 days, Esra, it's going to be on March 15th, it's going to be the Global Islamophobia Awareness Day, which the Islamists are pushing. And I think people need to start rejecting that term and realizing that it's the left and the Islamists that are working together to suppress free speech on these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we count among our allies ex-Muslims now who have left Islam, but they are powerful voices coming from the Islamist, network. I feel for them because they were so traumatized with the experience that they left the faith. They just lost hope with the religion itself. And I always believe that, they represent, along with us, some of the greatest threat to the Islamist establishment, because we know, we can't be fooled. And so what I've just loved watching is the Iranian women and the leaders there, like Masih Alinejad, flip the narrative on the far left and the Islamists and just shame them. Just stand up unapologetically for fundamental principles of human rights and women's rights, and dare to tell people to call them Islamophobes, while they're doing it, because that's what we have to do. We have to reject this tactic of shaming us into silence and recognize what it is. Another disinformation, character assassination tactic used to discredit people with rational thought. And nobody should succumb to it. That's the clarity that I knew as a mom activist, Zuhdi, that I couldn't even know fully as a Muslim feminist activist, because that it's lonely, as fighting within our community. But when they came for our kids, wow, the network is so vast. I have so many friends from so many different places in that oppression matrix, Chinese immigrants, Korean immigrants, Arab immigrants, American-born citizens here who grew up in Louisiana, West Virginia, the depths and reaches of our nation, and that know life is complicated. No single race has a ticket, a golden ticket to success. I grew up in West Virginia. I know how much the economic challenges of our white community there have handicapped them and their children. And so we are a diverse community, and we are the greatest threat, I think, that there exists to this woke army establishment, because they can call us every name in the book and it just bounces off of us. My friend Suparna Dutta, she says she carries this rejection by the woke army and all their insults as a badge of honor. And our friends in the Jewish community, they too are subjected to this, because they are called white supremacists now by the Palestinian, ideologues, because they want in this new hierarchy of human value to diminish the real tragedies that have happened to Jewish people. And so they want to diminish their own experience so that they can push their own agenda. And so, I think we are their worst nightmare.
Amen. And when we come back, let's end, Asra, if you could, talking about these coalitions, the coalitions that every American should build between interfaith community, Jewish, Hindu, Muslim, Christian, agnostic, all the different faith communities, ethnic communities that can form coalitions. And we'll talk last about our Clarity Coalition. You mentioned Clarity before, but we have a coalition called Clarity that's Muslims, non-Muslims joining against Islamism. And also I think your book sort of highlights why these coalitions are so important. We'll be right back.